All right, hello everybody. Welcome to Better Said Than Done. That's what I like to hear. I am your host for the evening, Jack Shear. I'm thrilled to be here with you. We have 6 amazing tellers who are going to be coming up. I want to first welcome all of those who've come to join us here at the Old Shebeen. Give yourselves a round of applause for coming out into this crazy world. And now I don't have to yell quite as much. And I also want to thank the folks at home who have dialed in to CSCS Dialed In. I'm that old. You're on a 2600 baud modem, and we are just little pixelated, barely moving pictures. The theme for this evening is graduation, stories of growing up, and stories of moving on. And we have another technical glitch. Hold on. It's our fearless leader, Jessica Robinson, everybody. That's right. So yes, graduation, stories of growing up, and stories of moving on. Before I introduce, tell you about our tellers tonight, I just want to take a brief moment to acknowledge that a lot of us here and at home are probably dealing with some pain right now. It's been a pretty difficult couple of days. It is our hope that these amazing, talented tellers can offer you a moment of respite or a balm in this time. And if we can do that, we will have more than done our jobs. So you have the privilege of getting to see these amazing storytellers. They are by name Nick Baskerville, Noah Baum, that's right, Bonnie Gardner, Giselle Ruzani, Gail Turner, and Diana Vega. There we go. This is an amazing crowd. Wow. And I can only assume those of you at home on your couches are just whooping it up too. So thank you for that. I'm going to bring up our first teller for the evening. His name is Nick Baskerville. You can check him out at stop365.blog if you're on the interwebs. We have a tradition here at Better Said Than Done. We ask our tellers a question so that we can use it as a way of introduction before they come up. So the question that I asked each of our tellers for the evening is this. If you were giving a graduation speech today, what one bit of wisdom, perspective, or advice would you want to give to the class of 2022? Nick Baskerville answers this way. Never make the same mistake twice. That's why I make brand new ones. Sometimes a few at the same time. Please bring up this wise man, Nick Baskerville.
Wow. So from over there, when I looked up here, I was like, man, I don't think it's high enough. I'm gonna have to raise it when I get there. And I realized my afro's is high. But this is roughly where it should be for me. So I find myself trying to answer this quintessential question that I wonder if other people have had to, and it makes me nervous. What am I going to do when I grow up? It's 1992, I'm 17, I'm getting ready to graduate high school here in a few months. I'm attending Mannheim American High School, so it's a military base, it's a American high school, but it's in Germany. And so I'm trying to answer the question that has been just asked by my mother. And I'm saying, well, see, I've been thinking about, but there's the other options, and she stopped me to let me know that this is not an essay question. It is multiple choice. The options are leave home and go to college, leave home and go to work, leave home. I felt like I thought there was something missing there, but I wasn't going to challenge her. This is a woman who is from the hood, has a black belt in karate, and is combat trained. So I've got to figure out what to do. And really the only answer that I have is to delay graduating. I figure that, hear me out, maybe somebody back there on the internet is with me. Like, I figure if I failed 12th grade and stayed one more year, right? That would give me time to sort it out. I couldn't bring myself to tell my mom that my plan for growing up was to be a failure. I don't know how that works out for any of your moms or anything like that. I just didn't see it working well for mine. So I come up with a new plan. I start looking at colleges, right? And there's so many colleges, and in the colleges they have all these different choices. We went to one of them. It was in Munich, Germany, and so we went to the college and we're looking around, and they've got this great pond or lake or whatever, and it's like absolutely clear. It is beautiful looking, and they've got these mountains, and they've got a nice downtown, and we're walking. And I walked through one of the buildings in a tour, and I had a moment of clarity the next day. Actually, it's called sobering up. Well, the building I went through, it was a schnapps factory. I was unaware that at the end of tour like this, that they had samplings. They had peach schnapps, and they had peppermint schnapps, and those were all the ones I remember before I worked my way down the rest of them. But that next morning, what I realized is there's a lot of choices, and I'm still not sure that I'm ready to make them. I am no closer to figuring out what I want to do when I grow up. A few weeks go by, so now I'm back in school, and one of the days, of course, they have the college visits days, right? So they've got you're in the auditorium, and they have all of the rows of tables and the colleges that are there, and some job recruiters, and somehow, some way, I find myself standing in front of the military table with the recruiters that are there. Now, I think military recruiters get a bad rap. Right? People say that they lie to get people in to meet quotas. I don't think that they lie. I think we ask bad questions. Right? So the questions I asked were like, hey, can I get a good job after I get out the military? Hey, can I go travel cool places after I get out the military? Hey, is this going to help me get dates while I'm in the military? I'm 17 at the time, y'all. This is where my mind is at. He says yes to all that stuff. I'm sold. I collect up all the different branches, and I go to my mom and said, I'm going to join the military. And she says, no. She reminds me of what the options were and says that that's not there. I want to tell her that technically it fits with option B, leave home and get a job. But she's still the woman from the hood with a black belt in karate with combat trained. I'm not really up for speaking up that much. Like I said, it's 1992. 1991, Desert Storm just finished. And even though it was successful, in large part there for the allies that went there to the Middle East, that doesn't mean that people weren't harmed. That doesn't mean that we didn't necessarily know people who didn't make it back. And all the other things that happened there that we could see on our military base. My mom didn't want me to go into the military. Honestly, I'm not sure she really wanted me to go, period. Despite all of the choices and options, it's just one of those, this is what you're supposed to do, so how do we figure it out? A day or two later, I'm listening on the phone in another room, and I hear my mom talking to my uncle. Now, my uncle is not in the Army. My uncle is a Marine. He's not an active Marine, but I don't know if you know how Marines work. There is no retired Marine, there's no ex-Marine, there is no Marine biology. You are just a Marine. And so they're talking back and forth, and eventually she comes out and says, I talked it over with your uncle. You can join the military if, and only if, you join the Air Force. All right, so there's a bit of a rivalry between branches, right? So they fight like brothers and sisters, right? You have the Army, the Air Force, the Marines, and the Navy. The Coast Guard is not, they're not one of the brothers and sisters, but they're like a cousin, right? So you know they exist, you see them every now and again. Now we got Space Force, which I guess that's like a surprise baby, like, oh, hey, we're still doing this? Whoa. They figure, they know I'm going in enlisted. And typically in your military, it's the enlisted people at the front line, except for the Air Force. The Air Force has this weird thing where it says, we're going to put the people who are officers in front line and send them, and look, y'all go there and fight, and we'll be right here. We'll be right here, and you just come on back. So that's how I joined the military October 1992, joining the Air Force. I didn't even know they had a deferred deferment plan, right? Like, it's like you put your career on layaway. I was like, this is awesome. But I joined the military, and so now I'm ready to figure out what I'm going to be. Only I had no idea that this was only the beginning of my journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick, for that. When the words 1992 and schnapps are mentioned to me, I can only remember election night 1992 when I, as an inexperienced drinker, decided that the only thing I would drink that night would be peppermint schnapps straight, no ice. It was the worst hangover of my life. So kids, don't do that. No straight schnapps for you. Thank you so much, Nick. All right, coming up next to our stage, we have Giselle Ruzani. She gave me a couple of answers to my question, what wisdom would you impart to the class of 22? What she told me about this evening was a bit of advice she'd gotten about education, being a professor, an educator, and that's tune in on the students and tune out the administration, which I think is brilliant and fantastic advice. But she also provided this one, which I've been looking forward to performing, because it's the only one where I can pretend I'm at the podium, wearing my robes, and addressing. Dear class of 2022, your graduation is a sign you overcame a series of very unpredictable years. You have shown resilience, persistence, and tolerance. You found a way to keep going and to do the tasks that were asked of you without giving up on yourself. I hope you take this resilient wisdom forward. And now that even when life takes everything you know from you, you still know how to creatively adjust and achieve the goals close to your heart. Congratulations. And please welcome up Giselle Ruzani.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
My story is actually from a graduation that just happened very recently. I finished my PhD in expressive arts therapy. And in January, I decided I would change my whole life. And I quit. I quit my job as a professor at the university, and I quit my job as a professional dancer. And I don't know if you know this, but most of the people that do PhD are looking for a professorship. They want to, continue their academic life. But for me, that was enough. I had 10 years as an adjunct, meaning I basically accepted anything that was asked of me without ever asking for any extra pay. That was the game. And that was okay with me because it was my passion, I said. This is what I'm supposed to do. I will do anything to just keep dancing. You see, something very different happened inside of me through my studies. My doctoral studies was about transgenerational trauma. And I started to dance with my ancestors and learn about my lineage. And when I did that, something amazing happened where I felt that my identity and my sense of belonging shifted from being in the dance world to just being me. And so I finally quit. I was done. I have done my part, and I suddenly was free. You see, my life as a dancer was a bit of a two-hand deal. In one hand, it was always my lifeline. In the other hand, it was kind of an abusive, neglectful relationship. Meaning, dance could throw me across the floor, bruise me, injure me, and I'll just keep dancing. Dance could just basically take toenails out of my toes, bring blisters under my feet, and I'll just keep dancing. I would starve myself and faint multiple times from just sheer exhaustion, and I wake up from my faint and keep dancing. Dancing for me was everything. I could just do anything for it. And that's how my life went until now. January 2022, guess what? I was with my friends, basking in the sun, baking breads, eating as much as I wanted, doing happy hours and planning vacation trips. In one of these happy hours, my friend and I decided we'll go to Ireland. And there I was, in the middle of the Greenland, the magical world where you could find a pot of gold under a rainbow. And I was so happy. And I thought, you know what? I made the right decision. This is it. For my ancestors, I no longer was going to be a servant. From now on, I was going to make choices that made sense. Choices about love and self-acceptance. I was finally free. So it was surprising to me that in the middle of County Clare, just 20 minutes from the cliffs of Moher, I wake up after a nightmare. I was in panic. I woke up in a panic because in my nightmare, I have not missed one, but 2 classes I was supposed to teach. And I was rushing to the 3rd one, which I didn't know where the classroom was, and I had no lesson plan. Suddenly, I wake up, reaching to my phone. I get the phone and immediately open my email. And I knew, even before I woke up, I knew the hook in my heart, pulling me back to the dance world, to the university. I knew it. And when I opened my email, there it was, the evidence. An invitation to return for a 1-year full-time position. Now you have to understand, I have waited for this my whole entire life. But now I was too old for this. It was too many months too late. I have created a new life. I finally was happy, wasn't I? I finally was done, right? I didn't have to return. It was a difficult life. It wasn't even worth it, was it? And as I was in a complete panic, I bought some time and sent an email saying, I'm out of the country, can I tell you later? And I thought about it. As I got back, I really decided to say no. I decided to say no because I didn't want to say goodbye to my friends again and sacrifice everything that I built. Again, let go of everything. Just go back and be a slave. Do everything they want. Faint again, starve again, have blisters. I don't think so. As I read and reread the email, I started to remember my first dance class. I was only 3 years old, and I was a really sad little girl. We just had moved from New York City to Rio de Janeiro, and I was miserable. My parents was just initiating their medicine career there, but I didn't adjust well. I decided I would not talk again. I wasn't talking, I was definitely not eating, and I definitely didn't want to go to school. My mom was exasperated. She would look at me and go, Gigi, come on, you're a bad advertisement for my clinic. Eat something. I just couldn't swallow life. In her despair, she decided to bring me to a dance class. She thought, maybe it'll open up her appetite. So I'm there in the front of that huge classroom, and my mom says, Gigi, you stay in this classroom until the lesson is over. Do we understand each other? I nodded my head as I did not speak at that time. I entered the room and it was freezing. I was so cold. I looked around, there was fluorescent light everywhere. There was no table, no chairs to hide under. All the kids had thrown out the backpacks in the corner of the room. I rushed over there and pretend to be a backpack. Maybe if I'm really good backpack, nobody would bother me. As I was trying to, perfect my camouflage, this gigantic woman enters in the room and throws this huge bag in the middle of the room, and suddenly the bag kind of floats in the air. It was kind of a Santa Claus, huge sack floating, and it lands without one sound. Now that picks up my attention. I thought, is this magic class or dance class? This woman was holding a big stack of records and goes to the other corner of the room, gets an album and puts it on. I knew the song on that album. I had it in my house. Instead of the new songs I was hearing in Rio, I was exactly knew everything about this album. It was called Bridge Over Troubled Waters by Simon and Garfield, as I used to call Garfunkel. And as I started to hear the song, everybody rushed into the middle of the room and started taking these scarves from inside of the bag. And they were blue, red, yellow, pink, and even fuchsia. They started to dance around the room, and suddenly there was a three-dimensional painting happening right in front of my eyes. And as a 3-year-old, that was the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. When I look around, I see that there was a green scarf that fell right next to me. I pick it up, I stand up, and I start to give it a little wave. And as I did the little wave, I look up, and there she was, with this biggest smile, inviting me to dance with her. The friendliest girl I have ever seen. And I started to dance with her. And as I moved through the space, I realized, hold on a second, this little girl is me. I really didn't recognize myself. I used to lock myself in the bathroom and just see tears coming down my face, wondering when the tears actually end, and where is this water being stored in my face? And suddenly, there she was. That smiley girl was me. I have never seen myself this happy. And that is when I signed this invisible bondage contract. It didn't matter what happened in my life. I would never, ever, ever stop dancing. And that's what I did. I never did stop dancing. I did all the creative dance classes, then ballet, then jazz, tap, modern, postmodern, dance as performing arts, then dance therapy, and now I even had a PhD in expressive arts therapy about dancing with my ancestors. And I read and reread that email. Would I really say no? I wanted this, but I also didn't want to feel like I was, part of this situation where it was good, but it was painful. Maybe I was just too old for this. So I decided to send a counter offer. Never did this in my whole entire life. This time, I would dance only the classes I wanted to teach, and I was going to come back as an artist. And part of the choreographic work would be part of my load, and I only would come the days I wanted. And I sent it out, and as soon as I sent it out, I got a text from my director saying, "Don't expect a response from your email. We'll miss you, ta-ta." And that's when I knew I did the right decision. It was done, and I had this great story for you today. A graduation gift. I finally had overcome passion, lust, desire for just happiness, self-care, logic. And that is when suddenly, 2 weeks ago, I get an email. Guess what? They accepted everything I asked. Well, not only you ruined the end of this story, as you know, I couldn't resist, and I said yes. But for one thing, I'm no longer going back as a servant. I'm going back as a graduate. Thank you.
Keep it going for Giselle. Oh my goodness. Wow. Before I got into this racket, I spent about 30 years in community theater, mostly doing musicals. And I'm a decent singer, I'm a pretty good actor, I'm a horrible dancer. And I have immense admiration for anyone who can dance and for anyone who can turn dance into education and research and connection. I think that's to be commended. Great story, Giselle. Sorry, folks at home. Okay, so we have one more teller for this part of our show. Then we're going to take a brief break. Our teller coming up to the stage now is Gail Turner. His answer to my question about what wisdom he would impart to the class of 22 is, come or stay at home. And these are his words. Among other things, my dad was a professional card player, and this related to betting. But it was resonant in everything he did. Never do anything halfway. Sounds pretty amazing. Folks, please welcome to the stage Gail Turner.
I happen to agree with those words of wisdom, but I have to say to you, I'm so thankful he wrote it down, because when he said they'd ask this, I was like, what the hell did I say? And is it appropriate for public viewing? Oh, I get by with a little help from my friends. I'm going to tell you all this evening that I believe we live into the stories we tell ourselves. And there's something else that I wholeheartedly believe is that whenever you open your mouth, whether you realize it or not, your intention is to influence your audience. As the night goes on, I want you to keep these thoughts in mind, okay? Because everything I'm going to tell you as I stand here is the God's honest truth. And when I'm done, I'm going to have told you the biggest lie you've ever heard, okay? And I'm going to ask you, I'll ask one of you, I'll ask you for a show of hands, I'll ask one of you who's caught what the lie is, okay? Now, I started performing when I was 4 years old. When I was 10, I began carrying brick for my father. I could not wait to go to work with my father. I adored my father, and I have to tell you that by lunchtime on that first day on a construction site, if I'd never seen one again, I'd have been quite happy. But quite frankly, taking your child to work was the 60s version of daycare. Consequently, I grew all the way up until I was an adult working on construction sites. But at 15, I did my first professional show as a song and dance man, and so I've got the legs to prove it and all the scars. But as time went on, it came time to decide to go to college. And I want you to know, I mentioned a moment ago that I adored my father, and I saw that I was going to be my daddy with a college degree. Because it did not matter how old I was made very clear to me that I was going to college, because my parents were, children of the Depression, and they believed education was the key to a successful life. So now Daddy had been, well, first he was a corporal in the Marines, and then he came to his senses, and he wound up being a second-class boatswain's mate in the Navy, and then he came home, and he became a bricklayer. So I thought to myself, I will either become a naval officer, or I will become an architect. And it came time to go to college, and almost 52 years ago to the day, I found myself at the University of Cambridge reading architecture. At the end of the summer, I found myself back in Virginia, much sooner than we had anticipated my return. And my father looked at me and said, what are you going to do now? And I said, well, I think I'll keep going to school. And he said, well, who do you think is going to pay for it? I said, I thought you would. He said, you need to think again. I just paid for that little vacation in England. I think you ought to join the Navy. It'll make a man out of you. And at the time, I had reached my 6-footness and about this big, and I looked at my daddy and I said, I have never let anybody ever say anything negative about you, and it's not going to start with you saying anything negative about you. I think you're doing a great job. Well, we negotiated, and eventually he agreed to loan me enough money to pay for my first semester. And I said, if I pay it back by the end of the semester, will you loan me the next one? He said, yes, if you pay it back by the end of this semester. By the end of my sophomore year, I no longer needed my father's money. I was working jobs on the side. In those days, you could contribute blood every 6 weeks. And my apartment rent was only $50, and they gave you $25. So every 3 months, I paid for my rent with just a little bit of blood. It wasn't that big a deal. You got to read the whole time you're sitting there. It's a very passive way of making money. By the end of my junior year, the draft ended. Now, I know you find it hard to believe that I'm of that age, but one of the major incentives for people my age to stay in college was Vietnam. And so once the draft was over, I'd been an architecture major, and then I came back to the States, and I was an engineering major, and then they closed the department at the end of that semester, and then I became an engineering technology major, but after 2 years, I was either going to have to transfer to East Tennessee State, and this is long before I had ever heard of storytelling, or I was going to have to transfer to West Lafayette, Indiana. I looked at a map and went, who in their right mind would want to go to either one of these places? And so I switched majors again, and now I'm an urban studies major. So I've gone from designing houses to designing cities, but I'm interested in all of this. And like I say, the draft ends. And I said to my dad, I'm going to take a semester off. And you're probably thinking, kids. But remember, I've been paying for it after the little vacation in England. And so I went just up the road here in Manassas to the old Hayloft Dinner Theater to begin my equity apprenticeship. And it was only going to be a semester. And 8 years later, I find myself back in Richmond, and I've been working as an actor up and down the East Coast, which means for years I've been working construction during the day, writing advertising copy, waiting tables, doing whatever was called for. But I was a professional actor, so let's not forget this. I was in the first professional production of Godspell in Virginia. They paid me $25 a week for 8 performances and all the food I could eat off the buffet. If I ever see shrimp jambalaya again till my dying day, I've seen enough of it, okay? I was also in the first professional production of Superstar in Virginia. Same arrangement. So now I'm back in Richmond, and while I was doing Godspell, I used to call my mother every day, in the middle of the day. She was working for the phone company, and one day she said, hold on, your father's on the other line. She came back on, she says, your father's had a heart attack, I'll call you back. For the next 3 weeks, my show would end at 11 o'clock at night. I would take a shower. I would drive from Norfolk to Richmond. I would sit by my father's bed from 1 o'clock until 6 in the morning, and then I would drive back to Norfolk. Now, the story I was telling myself was I was a good son. The reality is that I was a menace to society, that I didn't kill anybody during this time. I would wake up driving on the side of the road because your tire's on the gravel, right? So anyway, bless your heart. So by the time I'm back in Richmond, this is about 76, and I'm getting ready to go back to New York, and my daddy had a second heart attack, and I went, I am not getting this call on the road again, and so I decided to stay in Richmond. My mother said, how in the world are you going to make a living as an actor in Richmond? And I said, I'll figure it out. And so I kept working construction and doing shows at night, and so now I'm 28 years old, and I decided it's time to go back to school. Now the difference here is that now I have a wife to support, and she's expecting me to continue supporting her on the level that I was doing when I was working a day job and doing theater at night. And so I borrowed a little bit of money, and I played cards and backgammon, and she didn't notice any change in our income. But 3 semesters later, one of the guys I'm going to school with says, if you'll quit school and run your theater company full time again, I'll quit and work with you. And I've got 2 friends who quit their job and work with you. And so I took a class at a time. Over the years, one at a time, until I found myself sitting in my advisor's office. Now, by this time, the chairman of the department was my advisor, because we were the only 2 who'd been there as long as I'd been there, right? And he said to me, how long have you been here? And I said, since 1970. And he looked at me and he says, what do you say we just graduate you? And I said, well, that's what I'm here for, Richard. This is my last class. He said, no. What do you say we just graduate you? So I got up and I shook his hand, I thanked him, and I said, do you know my address? He said, yes. I said, mail me the diploma. I'm going back to the office. And so I left his office, and I remember it was such a great day. The sun was shining. It was lovely. I'm walking across campus because our theater company's office was literally in a little warehouse right off the campus. And I looked around at all these smiling children, and I realized that some of these freshmen had been born my freshman year. So this had been a lovely journey. Now, has anybody figured out what the big lie is here yet? Not the big lie that we're all living with these days, but I mean the big lie of this story. Anybody got any idea what the big lie was? None of you? It's that I paid for my college. Okay? Now let's think about it for a second. When I started college, a semester's tuition was $198. Okay? Now, I made $2 an hour, and by the end of my freshman year, I was making $2.50 an hour working construction. I was giving blood at 25 bucks a pint every other month, right? Which meant you could pay your rent, you could eat like a king, you could have a car, and you could pay your tuition and your books and everything, okay? Now, granted, 17 years later, by the time I graduated, I was paying more than that per credit hour, but still, compared to what kids have to pay today, it was a free ride. Because do you know who was really paying for my education and all of my peers? It was y'all. The federal and state government made massive contributions to post-secondary education all across the country. But starting in 1970, a pattern began. Every year since then, they have made less and less and less contributions in post-secondary education. And do you know what that means for the Gen X and the millennials in particular? They and their families are shouldering this burden. Now, One of the most popular programs in the history of this country was the GI Bill after World War II, okay? And the nation as a whole recognized that it was to our benefit to have an educated workforce that did not have a crippling debt on their backs. I told you earlier, you open your mouth, you want to influence people, right? What I want to influence you to do is whenever you get a chance to speak to your state and your federal legislators, encourage them to increase their contributions to our post-secondary education across this country. And don't give me things like, well, they're just adding jacuzzis, because I've seen those dorms these days, and I've seen Hyatt that didn't look as nice as that. Just because they have kept us in quarters reminiscent of medieval dungeons doesn't mean we want our children living in those places, okay? The second thing is, President Biden has said that he's in favor of canceling student debt. Years ago, you may remember the TARP program. All that money they gave to the banks, they didn't give it to us, that they gave to the banks. Do you realize that if that amount of money had been spent to pay off every mortgage in this country, every one of us would have had money that we could have gone out and spent, which would have rejuvenated our economy. If we cancel the student debt, these kids can get on with their lives, they'll have the possibility of owning a home, they'll have the possibility of contributing to our society. As it is, unlike Nick, they're all going to be living at home. Now, I would love to have my daughters at home, but we need to help them get out of the nest. So just remember, we all get by with a little help from our friends. Thank you.
Keep it going for Gail Turner. Okay, so we've come to the halfway point of our show. We're going to take a brief break. I have just a couple of things before we do that. One, whenever Godspell comes up, I'm reminded of the legendary, and I apologize for the echo here in the room. Okay, so I'm reminded of the legendary 1972 production in Toronto, Canada, that starred Eugene Levy, Martin Short, Gilda Radner, and Paul Schaefer. If I had a time machine, that's the first place I would go. So thank you. I also want to endorse and underline and second what Gail had to say. The things you care about, the things that are going to make this nation survive, bother our elected officials, and if they don't get it done, elect new people. All right, so we have some great shows coming up. I want to tell you about them before we go to break. On July 14th, we have an online show, a special themed show. The storytellers will be Lynn Ford, Carol Moore, Miriam Middell, Ingrid Nixon, our fearless leader, Jessica Robinson, and Megan Wells. The theme for the evening is Beyond Barbarella, a virtual sci-fi themed storytelling show that will prove that the future is female. All right. And then, a week and a half later, come on back here to the Old Shebeen, July 23rd. We are going to have the theme Bed and Breakfast and Beyond. Stories about sleep, food, and travel. Our tellers for that night will be Jenna Mina, Antoine Perry, Lou Novak, Sufyan Zemnikov, and 2 players to be named later. Could it be one of you? Who knows? We'll be back in 5 minutes. All right, folks, we are coming back from the break. Find your seats, and we will get ready for our next teller. Now, normally, when I start the show, I remind people to make sure that their phones are on silent. I didn't do that this time, but luckily none of you got called, so I'm very glad for that. If you could please now make sure that your phones are on silent, I would appreciate it. And management regrets the error. All right, so we are coming back now. We have 3 more great tellers, and let's bring up our next one. This is Diana Vega. You can check her out at dianavega.com. That's DANAVEIGA.com. Her answer to the question, which I will now refresh for you: if you were giving a graduation speech today, what's one bit of wisdom, perspective, or advice you'd want to impart to the class of 2022? Diana's answer: save your money and fuck shit up. Diana Vega.
Thank you. I stand behind both of those things. All right. So I had just graduated from Spelman College, and yes, thank you. I had no clue what I wanted to do with my life. Now, if you don't know about Spelman College, it is one of 2 historically black women's colleges in Atlanta. And so for 4 years, I was surrounded by amazing black women. And it felt like all of them, like they were confident and they knew what they wanted to do and with their futures. And when we'd be at a program and we'd go around the room, you'd have to introduce yourself and say your major, and someone would be like, I'm an education major and I'm gonna be a teacher, but it wouldn't stop there. They'd be like, and then I'm gonna open up my own school or whatever. Or someone would be like, I'm a political science major and I'm gonna be a lawyer, and then it wouldn't stop there. They'd be like, and then I'm gonna be a public defender and like get people off death row. And I was like, ooh. Or someone would be like, I am a biology major and I'm gonna be a doctor. But it wouldn't stop there. They'd be like, then I'm gonna go to the Mississippi Delta and be an OBGYN for people who can't have access to health care. And I was just like, oh my God, how do y'all know all this? When they get to me, I'd be like, skip past me, because I don't know. What was my major? French. What was I gonna do with that? I don't know. I didn't know. I just wanted to study abroad in Paris, which I did. It was fabulous. But I was like, I don't know what to do after this. I thought about being a teacher, but those kids are bad as hell. And then I thought about being a journalist. I did an internship at a newspaper. I was like, this ain't for me either. But I graduated and I didn't know what I wanted to do. But one thing I did know is I was not coming back home to Maryland, okay? I was gonna be in Atlanta and I was gonna make it work. I was gonna figure it out, right? So the apartment I shared with my friend from Spelman, we had to move out because she went to New York to law school. She was focused. And one of my mom's best friends was from Atlanta. And so she had her child home that she rented me. And it was a lovely home. It was 3 bedrooms at the bottom. And then they had put an addition with a bedroom and a basement and a huge closet. It was only $600. Which was amazing, right? I was like, I can cover this. No matter what job I get, I can cover $600 of rent. So I'm gonna stay in Atlanta and figure it out, because also I had met a man, right? And you know, when you're 22 and it's all new and shiny and happy, I was like, this might be the one. I have to stay here. I have to see what happens, right? So I'm in Atlanta, really no skills, trying to find a job, sending out resumes and everything. And finally, I got this job at a Montessori school, kind of as a teacher assistant, right? But it was really far from my house, and I started and I realized this isn't really working. I was in charge of getting the arts and craft projects ready, and I don't know what y'all was doing in kindergarten. I don't know what I was doing, but I can I can't draw a straight line. I can't cut straight. I color out the lines. So all the things I was trying to get ready, they were looking really janky for the kids, basically, right? So I'm in there, I've been doing this job for about a couple months, and they sent me down and it's like, girl, this is not your ministry. We are gonna have to let you go. So I was like, okay, that's fair. So now I've been fired, and I'm still I am not moving back home. I'm not doing it. I have to find something else to do where I can make some money. So this is Atlanta, you can be a stripper, but no, I didn't go that route. I was like, I'm gonna go to bartending school, yes. So I go for bartending school for 2 weeks. You know, you're learning how to do all the mixes and the drinks that I'll never make again, like Singapore sling, but you know, you learn all the stuff and all that. And I take my final exams, yes, exams, plural, there's two, a written one and then, you know, whatever. Show us you can make drinks one. And I pass and I get my certificate, I'm like, yes, now I'm a bartender, I have to find a job, right? So I find a job at the Omni Hotel in the banquets department, and things are going pretty well. When you work banquets, it's mostly night jobs because people who are having conferences don't usually ask for a bartender at 10 o'clock in the morning, right? So I'm working at night, and one of my favorite cousins, he was raising his baby on his own, so I'm like being his nanny, and things are kind of clicking, right? And I'm able to pay the rent, and I'm in love with this guy, and things are going well, except they weren't really going well. And it turned into an abusive situation. Now, I didn't know at the time because abuse is a gradual thing. So it started out like mainly verbal abuse, and I had not been used to this. I didn't grow up in a household where people yelled or screamed at each other, and I'm just like, well, I'm not really sure what's going on, but I just love this guy and I'm gonna try to make it work, and you know, maybe these are just his moods and all the justifications and excuses you make. And so it was verbal at first, and then it became physical one night, a physically abusive one night. And so even in this moment, I knew I could call my cousin and he could call his cousins, because his mom was from Atlanta. He could call his cousins and they could take him out. But the thing about abuse is that you feel embarrassed, and I felt ashamed, and I didn't want to tell anyone, and I didn't want to tell my parents that I had failed, that I was kind of making it in Atlanta, but I really wasn't. It wasn't great, I wasn't struggling, but I was not rooted in anything. And so a few weeks go by after the physical incident, and me and this dude are still together, and I'm still trying to figure it out. And I'm not a parent, but I have heard that usually as a mom, you can feel when something is wrong with your child. Even if they don't tell you, you can feel it in your spirit. So a few weeks go by, and I get a call from my parents, and they say, we are coming to get you at the end of the month. No prompting or anything. I was like, what? They say, we didn't send you to school to be out here bartending, pack your stuff, we coming to get you, no questions. I'm like, no, I'm grown, you can't just tell me you about to come get me. I don't think so. And they were like, no, we coming to get you on this day, this time, so have your stuff ready to go. And so I'm devastated, even though I'm in this not great situation, in this abusive relationship. I still don't want to leave. I still don't want to have to go back home. But what could I do? They said they were coming, and they came and got me, right? Came and got me, we had a U-Haul, and then we drove my car to Atlanta. And so when I got home, you know, I'm depressed for different reasons, and I'm just like, this is terrible. I have no freedom. I'm used to going out, being in the streets, and drinking, and all the things that you do when you're 21, 22, and now I feel stuck, right? And so I'm getting acclimated and whatever, and then I'm home maybe for a few weeks, and a storm, a really bad storm, came through Atlanta. And a tree went through the window of the bedroom where I slept. And so if I had been there, I probably would have died or at least been seriously injured, right? Because it came right through where my bed was. And so you hear that and you're like, oh my God. And it is a perfect example or personification, whatever, that, you know, moving on can be tough, it can be hard, it can be painful, you can kick and you can scream, but sometimes moving on will save your life. Thank you.
Keep it going for Dan and Vega. I do know a conference where you can drink at 10 o'clock in the morning. I go to a lot of Star Trek and sci-fi conventions, and you know, when you're a kid, it's just a lot of fun, and you're going to see Mr. Spock and whatever, and that's great. But once you're an adult, it's like, oh, wait, the bar's open at 10? Anyway, probably sharing too much. But I do want to share this. Diana has a Capitol Fringe show next month. It is entitled, I'm Just Doing My Job, one-woman show. Her dates are Saturday the 16th to Saturday the 23rd of July. You can find all the information you need at capitolfringe.org. All right, so our next teller coming to the stage is Noah Baum. You can find her at noahbaum.com, noabaum.com. She is the author of A Land Twice Promised, An Israeli Woman's Quest for Peace. And she is also the author of a new picture book, How the Birds Became Friends. Now, for those of you here tonight, she's got them for sale right here. For those of you watching at home, check the online places, you will find it. Noah's answer to my question about wisdom for the class of 22. Stay present in your body. Opening your heart to kindness and compassion isn't easy. That's why all the world's spiritual traditions teach practice compassion from staying present. But I learned that staying in my body more and carving out time away from screens really helps. Folks, Noah Baum.
Thank you so much. Well, it was 1986. Raise your hand if you were born then. You know what I'm talking about. Oh, good. I'm in good company. It was 1986. I had just returned home to Tel Aviv, Israel, after 2 years in New York City with nothing. Nothing the Hollywood movies promised. No fortune, no Oscar, no Emmy, no Tony, no man. But I did manage to get a graduate degree in educational theater and drama therapy from NYU. And miraculously, I landed a job in Tel Aviv at a small special education school called Brushim, a small school for boys with learning differences, emotional, social, behavioral issues, with an IQ average and above. Smart boys for whom this school is the last stop before the street, prison, or the psychiatric ward in an institution. And anyone graduating the 8th grade from Brushim that does not end in the street, prison, or the psych ward is considered a success. And we had many, actually, I shouldn't say we, because I wasn't part of it yet, but many of those students actually were integrated into regular high schools thanks to the principal, Valda. She was a dynamic powerhouse of a woman, and the team of teachers who were just amazing. They worked together as a team, they supported each other, and they gave their hearts and souls to those boys. Now, there was never drama before in that school, and I was hired to be the drama teacher for all the grades 3rd through 8th. Now I'm so excited. My first job out of grad school, and I am brimming with knowledge. I am brimming with knowledge and creative ideas. And I walk into my first class, it's the 4th grade. About 10 boys sitting behind individual desks, and they look reasonably disciplined as the teacher is instructing them to finish whatever they're doing. And I'm thinking, what's special ed about these guys? Now, I had planned to do everything in a circle. I was taught in graduate school. The circle is the best way to encourage creativity, equality in the circle, connection, community, and I had planned my favorite circle game to foster creativity and bonding and trust, the Hoochie Coo. This is called the Hoochie Coo. Let us see what you can do. In my graduate assistantship at NYU, I had led hundreds of Hoochie Coos in hundreds of classes all throughout the New York City metro area. This is called the Hoochie Coo. You can join in if you dare. Let us see what you can do. This is called the Hoochie Coo. Let us see what you can do. And the way it works is that we all stand in a circle and you clap, you snap your fingers, you move to the rhythm, and one by one the students go into the middle and they show a move. And there's no right or wrong. Anything goes. You could break dance, you could stand on your head, you could do somersaults, you could even just stand and not do anything, as long as you go back to your place in the circle at the end of the phrase. This is called the Hoochie Coo. Let us see what you can do. This is called the Hoochie Coo. Let us see what you can do. So here I am, the teacher introduces me. This is the new drama teacher, Hamora Noah, teacher Noah. And I jump right in with my chirpy theatrical voice. Okay, everyone, let's move the desks and make a circle. And the minute those words leave my lips, a primal roar erupts. Woo! 10 boys rise as one with unbridled glee. Crunched balls of paper start flying all over the room. Desks become bumper cars. Bam, 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 triumphantly and repeatedly, mowing anything in the way. Bam, bam, multiple versions of Superman take off, hurling the villain into collision with distant stars. One boy is crunched under a table, screaming like a butchered animal, and while my brain is attempting to process any of this, a chair flies across the room and barely misses me. And all this in less time than it takes to say, this is called the Hoochie Coo. The teacher moves in to take control over the chaos. She hisses, "Drama at desks until further notice." And by the time the room is put back in order and all the consequences and reprimands are allocated, there's very little time left for drama class. And the room is vibrating with a simmering chaos that threatens to erupt again any minute. And I know I have to do something, but my mind is blank. Complete and utter blank. Gone is the lesson plan. Gone are the binders full of ideas from graduate classes. Not even a whiff of creative anything from my cherished volumes of creative drama in the classroom or Viola Scolan's theater games. Nothing. The rumbling in the room is growing. The teacher is looking at me. In my desperation, I summon my best and loudest army sergeant voice. "When I say one, you stand one!" To my shock, 10 boys are rising to their feet and stand in obedient shock. "When I say two, you sit two!" The shock morphs into giggles, but they sit. "When I say three, you jump on one leg!" The room is filled with eager, one-legged jumping bundles of energy. I am the mix-up monster. My job is to mix you up. Your job, not get confused. I give you one try. After that, you get confused, you are out. Who will be the winner? competitive testosterone kicks in. And we are on. I'm barking at the top of my sergeant voice. 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1, fried chicken! And anyone not listening or focusing, and there were many that day, has to sit down. Now losing is not an acceptable option for these guys. So protests erupt and violence is threatened, and immediately I declare, he who loses in silence and dignity can return to the game at the next round. For the rest of the week, it's all I do with all the classes. My sergeant voice with that 1, 2, 3 ridiculous thing. And I'm thinking, is this what I just spent 2 years getting a graduate degree? What's creative about this? How is this drama? How can I even call myself a drama teacher? When the principal calls me in to ask me how it's going, I'm honest the way we Israelis tend to be, and I say to her, well, not really doing anything I planned, just kind of yelling commands, and it's not really creative or drama. She smiles. Yes. I heard what happened in Miri's class. Listen, Noah, with these boys, you start like this. Only when you have them under strict control in the palm of your hand can you slowly and gradually open and introduce your fancy schmancy creative drama. No circle. No getting up from behind desks until you have them like this. Baruch? Clear? No one teaches you that in graduate school. But to this day, it's probably the best single advice I've ever received in my life as a teaching artist. And for the next months, all the students are confined to their desks and they move as the monster commands. And soon there are more winners than losers, and soon there's winners that lead the games, and we do other things behind the desks, and eventually we move the desks out of the way, make a circle, and do the hoochie coo. Now the core of my graduate training is teacher as model. And I insist that all the teachers participate in all the activities, because for the kids to see the teacher become silly is a great way to bond and deepen the connection. Now Nomi, one of the veteran teachers, is a woman large in all directions. And she's got a spirit to match, and she immediately sees the benefits of this approach. She's the first to get into the circle and dance the hoochie coo. And undulating flesh bouncing to the rhythm. The kids are shrieking with delight, and soon even the shy ones and all those that think the drama is not cool enough for them are all in that circle. But not all the teachers are as enthusiastic as Nomi. And when I come to Valda, the principal, to complain and ask her to help me and explain how important it is for teachers to participate, she cuts my laments. Noah, you are 1, they are 8. You are not going to change them. It is your job to figure out how to work with each personality and every single teaching style. Goodbye. Didn't teach me that in graduate school either. But I learned to adapt to every single personality and teaching style. And after about 6 or 7 months, most of my classes are ready to graduate to the drama room. That's the small multi-purpose room that we have with no desks and room enough to make a circle. Now, by now, I know that discipline trumps drama. And when it comes time to take the 3rd graders all across the open corridors and courtyard of the school from their class to the multipurpose room, I become Max, from Where the Wild Things Are by Morris Sendak. I'm holding a ruler and the wild things are lined up behind me, and they can do goofy faces in silence as long as when I turn and look at them, they freeze in their scariest monster pose. Now, to be honest, Mission Multipurpose Room had to be aborted many times, but finally we managed to follow the rules of the game just enough to make it through the open courtyard to the multi-purpose room. And there I am, marching ahead with my wild things marching behind me. And I hear Valda, the principal, apologizing to a group of dignitaries from the Ministry of Education. It's okay, that's the drama teacher. She's only a little crazy. I worked at Boschim for almost 4 years until I got married and came to this country. And to this day, I carry them with me, those boys, those teachers, and Valda, the principal. And I think about them every time I teach. This is called the Vinci Crew. Let us see what you can do. This is called the Vinci Crew. Let us see what you can do. Thank you.
Keep it going for Noah Baum. Oh, fantastic. So, folks here at the Al Shabin, immediately after this program ends, please help us clear the tables, and we will be doing the Hoochie Kid.
That's a really fun idea.
It's not. Jessica, keep the camera rolling. Who knows what's going to happen? I was reminded, as you were talking about your first encounter with your students, Noah, of one of my favorite quotes. There are many different versions of this sentiment, but my favorite comes from Prussian Field Marshal Helmuth von Moltke the Elder. He said in 1871, "No plan of operations extends with any certainty beyond the first encounter with the main enemy forces." All right, folks. Wow, this has been a great night, hasn't it? Oh. And we got one more teller. So let's bring her up here. Our final teller for this evening is Bonnie Gardner. Her answer, what she would say to those bright young faces in their caps and gowns. If you find that you're the smartest person in the room, find another room to be in. Your education is just beginning. Keep learning, keep being curious. And if you're on a road trip, never pass a rest stop thinking, I'll just wait for the next one to find a bathroom. It's always going to be a lot farther than you guessed. Welcome, Bonnie Gardner.
Thank you. When my son was 3, we moved to the Virginia suburbs, and the very first thing I did after we unpacked the boxes was sign us up for a membership at the community pool. I had grown up near the beach, and the only time in my entire childhood I wasn't there or splashing in a pool was those 30 minutes after you eat something when you have to sit for some reason. But I wanted Alex to have a childhood around the water. And we had many wonderful years at that pool. After dinner swims, there all day on the weekends. We'd play these elaborate games where Alex and I were dolphins and my husband was a shark or a zombie shark. And we went to the beach on vacation, and Alex loved the sand and the water as much as I did. And then the summer he turned 13, everything changed. He started refusing to go to the pool with us. I'm too tired was always the excuse. And it took a lot of cajoling and maybe a little bribery to even get him in the car. And then we'd get there, and he wouldn't put on a suit, he'd just sit in a chair. And then there was this very frustrating vacation, spring break to Florida to visit my brother-in-law. 5 minutes from his house is Honeymoon Island State Park, this beautiful barrier island in the Gulf of Mexico. But getting Alex out of the car at the Honeymoon Island parking lot was a nightmare. We literally had to drag him onto the sand, and he spent the whole time asleep on the beach under a pile of towels in his hoodie and sweatpants. What happened to my little fish? People told me, you know, the teen years they're gonna be rough, but as the months went on, I realized he was really struggling and I needed to call in reinforcements. I found a therapist, and then after doing some really hard work, one night my kid rose up out of that dark sea, and like Venus standing on that clamshell, revealed her true self to me. My kid, assigned male at birth, was actually a girl, she explained. And in that moment, the only thing I felt was relief, because now we could move forward. Alexis, as she wanted to be known, growing into her true and authentic self, and me as her biggest advocate and supporter. And I took that on like it was a calling. I read books, I joined groups, I assembled a team of professionals. I talked to teachers and family members. I learned this whole new vocabulary: gender dysphoria, dysmorphia, dead name. I went online because you can find anything online, and I ordered this elegant black bathing suit made especially for trans girls. I was so focused on making sure Alexis felt completely supported and accepted that I never stopped for a second to think about how I was processing this momentous change in our family. I mean, I love my kid. How can I be anything but 110% behind her? Plus, this is her journey. This isn't about me. And then about a year into this, I crashed. I was sitting at work one day, waiting for a Zoom meeting to start, when I looked over at my phone. And when it's charging, it plays this steady slideshow of old photos. And I watched as it served up photo after photo of my adorable little boy. And it hit me like an ocean wave that little boy is gone. You know, intellectually, I know that parenting is a part of it. It's about letting go as your child moves through stages, but this was letting go of so much. I was sad, and then I was immediately ashamed of myself. I mean, Alexis is happy. I should be happy. But the feelings wouldn't go away. I mean, to Alexis, yes, I was always the big supporter, the advocate, but I had this dirty little secret. It was always brought on by old photos. Oh my gosh, a kindergarten graduation photo, I would just feel tears welling up in my eyes. And I was whipsawing between, you know, telling her, oh my gosh, I love that shade of eyeshadow on you, to feeling like I was gonna lose it. Well, this therapist that we had worked with told me that she was starting the 6-session class group for parents of trans kids on coping with grief. I guess that's what this is. And okay, 6 sessions, not a lot, but if I put in the hard work, I'll graduate from grief class and I'll get a reset. Well, from the very first session, it was complete judgment-free validation. It's okay to feel sad, the therapist said. You can still be 110% behind your kid and yet grieve the loss of that child you once knew. Both of these things can be true. In these sessions, I learned that, well, you know, those 5 stages of grief you've all heard of: anger, denial, bargaining, depression, acceptance. It's not this list that you tick off until you get to the end. It's better to think of grief, the therapist said, as a sea. And those stages are islands. And you're drifting. And you're crashing into one, and another, and another, and maybe back to the first, over and over. But eventually, you'll find that you're spending more time on the island of acceptance. And one day, it'll even be joyful acceptance. Another thing I learned was that bargaining, it doesn't necessarily mean, you try to strike some kind of deal with God, like, okay, if I do this, you'll make this happen. It's also just going over and over in your head all the things you wish you'd done differently. If only I had been more compassionate when Alexis stopped going to the pool. And why didn't I figure out her secret sooner? I spent so much time on the island bargaining. You'd think I had a vacation home there. Well, I don't know if it was the therapist or the other parents or just the permission to feel what I was feeling, but it all helped. There was never this big aha moment. It was this gentle drift. One day, I caught myself looking at baby photos, and I was smiling because parenting, part of it is learning how to let go as your kid moves through stages. And this journey that we're on, I wouldn't trade it for anything. So this spring, we went back to visit my brother-in-law in Florida. And the first day we were there, Alexis said, "Hey Mom, let's go to the beach, just you and me." Well, when your 15-year-old wants to spend time with you, you do not say no. So we jumped in the rental car and I hot-footed it over to Honeymoon Island. And we parked in that same parking lot where a few years ago I could barely get her out of the car. And we got our towels and our chairs. And then she whipped off her hoodie and her sweatpants. And she stood there in that bathing suit I'd ordered, that bikini, and said, "Check us out. Two hot babes at the beach." We went out onto the sand, and I found us a spot near where some teenage boys were tossing a football, because I was a teenage girl once. I know how to pick a spot on the beach. And we set up our chairs. She set hers up about, a few feet behind me. We could still talk, but in case one of those boys walked over, she wouldn't look like she was with her mother. And I took a selfie, but I included her in the shot. Unaware, unguarded, just sitting there, reveling in an outside that finally matched how she felt inside. And I wriggled my toes in the sand, and I listened to the waves. I wasn't out there in the sea, crashing into the islands of denial or bargaining. I was with my daughter on Honeymoon Island, the island of joyful acceptance.
Yeah, I don't have to tell you, keep that going. Wow. Bonnie, thank you for that story. I can think of about 24 things that I would love to say and share with the audience. But I will say this. I have been struggling with how to deal with the grief cycle. I know that it's not stage 1 to stage 5. I've been thinking of it as cyclical. Thank you for that. Among the many gifts of that story, thank you for that. I'm going to be able to use that, and I think all of us are going to have things that we can take from that story. Thank you so much. All right, that is the end of our show. I would like to invite our tellers to come on up here to take a final bow. While they are coming up, I want to thank a few people. First off, the Al Shabin and all of the folks working here, thank you for keeping us in food and drink. We appreciate it. Our volunteers, Alan DeBay, who is working the YouTube channel for us, And our fearless leader, Jessica Robinson, on the camera, on the door, on every little detail that goes into this thing. Want to thank you, our audience, both at home and here in front of us right now. Give yourselves a round of applause. We'll be back here July 23rd. Please come and join us. Thank you.
Get that thing out of my face. Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. All right. Hoochie coo. Let's go.
Please. I was thinking to myself, 1900 I was already at the graduate 5 years before, after 7.